Welcome to This Week in Local, a Localogy podcast featuring lively conversations about the local digital ecosystem, hosted by Localogy analysts Mike Boland and Charles Laughlin.
Hello, welcome to This Week in Local. Mike, how's it going?
Hi, Charlie.
So tell me what you're working on.
Sure. So this week, not sort of a single item or event, but more of a sort of like trend watching, realization this week. And this builds on our podcast episode last week that I don't want to be repetitive and go too much into it. Our audience can go back and listen to that. But briefly, it was all about how AI is being used and integrated with websites. I mean, of course, it's being integrated everywhere, but the particular intersection of like website builders. And that was from Newfold. Our guest was Sharon, Rowlands, CEO of Newfold Digital, and they have properties like web.com. The trend comes in where we're seeing actually more of that sort of similar integration. So Wix has done something recently where it's a similar sort of AI-generated page builder. So the point is that individuals or SMBs and people that aren't natural writers can use this whole sort of generative AI concept that we've been mostly talking about in other contexts. Visual assets, chat GPT, answering questions, etc. But in this case, using generative AI, to actually write copy.
That's a bit of a tongue twister.
Yeah, right. So to write copy on behalf of SMBs. And it makes sense if you think about like about us, just all these pages on your website. You know, a lot of these folks aren't natural writers. So this got me thinking, this trend where, last week, again, I don't want to be too repetitive, but we talked about the concept of AI being integrated all over the place. Some places make sense, some places don't. And that's pretty signature sort of dynamics for any early stage technology where it's just being sort of applied everywhere. And the sort of winning use cases will win out in the long run. But this got me thinking sort of two things. One is where AI will land on the sort of spectrum of SMB adoption, right? And to sort of flesh that out a little bit, if we look historically at sort of different comparative technologies, on one end of the spectrum, you have something like mobile and smartphones that very much landed with SMBs. And the reasons are pretty logical. It's something they can wrap their head around. It's a phone and it's a mini computer they can carry around with them. And a lot of SMBs are sort of outside of their deskless, as we say, right? The mobile device is perfect for them to conduct their business when they're out on a job or out in the kitchen or whatever the case may be. So mobile.
The van is the office.
Yeah, exactly. So as a comparative thing, mobile is one of those technologies that landed well. On the other end of the spectrum, you have things like more emerging tech that's just confusing as hell, metaverse, some of these things that just like, they don't even make sense to like brand advertisers and marketers that like, have big teams that are supposed to understand this stuff. So it's just never going to land with SMB. So that's the spectrum. So where does AI land? The sort of knee-jerk reaction is towards the latter. I mean, it's one of these sort of newfangled things. It's high-tech oriented. SMBs aren't going to get it. But seeing some of these integrations, again, if we're looking at just this one, which is bringing it to websites, it sort of makes sense in that it could engender a sort of feedback loop that gets SMBs to appreciate it because it's solving real pain points. It's not the AI they're hearing about on the news and reading about in TechCrunch, where it's like large language models and all of these confusing acronyms, and it gets all into that techie territory, but really tangible stuff that solves pain points. Again, like if I'm an SMB, I'm not a writer. If I can use this tool and maybe it's not packaged and delivered as AI, I mean, maybe that's the key is the actual, the delivery, but something that helps me to just like either write my About Us page or, as we talked about last week with Sharon Rowlands, not necessarily write it, but just sort of, kick off the process, get the creative juices flowing. It's sort of inspiration. So that really just got me thinking of where AI will land on that spectrum. I was previously thinking it would just be sort of in this confusing territory, but stuff like this could bring it to them. And that's the second point, not just where it will land, but what are the technologies that are going to deliver it to them and sort of acclimate them. And this sort of intersection of websites could be one of them in terms of sort of easing them into it. I can't think of many other applications of AI so far that are really going to like deliver it to SMBs and acclimate them to it. And this could be one of them. And that was really just an eye opener as I'm seeing more of these website players integrated in ways that just really make a lot of sense.
Couple quick thoughts. You said something a minute I don't know if it's exactly a minute ago,
Right.
recently, that maybe these things won't be called AI. And I think the term AI is going to be replaced with automation
Yeah.
at some point in terms of how it goes to market to like a small business.
Sure.
Say, automate this, automate that. And AI is doing it, but you don't have to necessarily, maybe AI is off-putting. The
Yeah.
term might
It does have some
with small business.
brand baggage, so to speak, in its sort of attachment to a lot of the, I don't know, sort of fear and fear mongering you see on some cable news and other
Right.
places about
that,
like,
and also it's big tech and it's complicated, even though
yeah. So
the whole point is it's not right. But yeah,
it's complexity plus it's sort of like are we going to like bring the robot revolution into our
we're
homes?
summoning the beast. Plus, I'm
Yeah.
dealing with really advanced technology. I don't want to do that because that's not me. I don't do that stuff.
Yeah. So
I don't do
right
tech
now the
stuff. I
term
do
AI is
plumbing.
hot.
Yeah.
I think you bring up a good point. Right now the term is hot. So all of these brands, Wix, Newfold, they're leaning into it. I think they're going to continue to do the same thing in terms of the capabilities, but I think eventually as that hype cycle does its thing, they might land on another sort of branding for the technology. I think automation makes a lot of sense.
I think it's around something around automation.
Yeah.
The term AI is going to fade into the background, I think, fairly soon.
Or assistant.
Personally,
Automation, assistant.
Assistant is another good one.
Yeah, here's your
I think
writing
that's even
assistant
better.
for
It's
your
even
website,
better.
stuff like that. Yeah.
It's your writing assistant. And also the other point I think you made quite substantially on last week's episode was the idea of this being a brainstorming assistant.
Yeah.
And I think that's not necessarily for SMBs, but for anyone who's thinking about how to use AI.
Yeah.
I think that is an extremely important way to think about using AI. If you're writers like us and we still want to do our own writing, maybe, but we need somebody to help us kickstart things.
Yeah.
That might be where AI comes in.
And one example from last week's episode, for those who didn't listen or those who did, to reiterate this point, and by the way, we'll put the link in the show notes so you can you can follow up on all this stuff. Last week's episode, the Wix article, etc. Was domain name, like finding a domain name. That's a painful process. I've been through that process. Too. Yeah, and it's very interesting how it can just help through that process. And it made me think it should be broader than that. It's not just thinking of a domain name. How about the name for the full-blown business itself? Because it's sort of like, putting names into almost like text prompts in generative AI and then seeing what it creates. And the key point is it's not just like reordering the keywords you put in and giving you different variations, but things that are like synonyms.
No, it does more than that.
Yeah, it's synonyms you may not have thought of, or this or that. And so so that brainstorming tool to come up with the name of your business, I think is where the real power lies in that, not just finding your domain name. And the two are
and
often...
a human still has to decide. Yeah. And a human still has to decide which idea is the best one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a tool. It's a brainstorming tool.
Right. The other thought I had, and you've sort of said this, was that the reason these website builders are leaning so heavily into AI is that it's sort of automatically expanding their solution set, isn't it? Because the content creation was always the thing that got in the way of the website getting done, right? And now that can be expedited significantly. Yeah. And it can become one of the that they offer.
And that's a good point, because one of the points of differentiation for a lot of these website players over the last, let's call it 5 years, has been more drag and drop, more WYSIWYG, more easy stuff. It fits along with that narrative. I mean, that's been really the rallying cry of some of the newer players like Squarespace and Wix, and just sort of like the page building itself. And this adds another dimension, not just page building in terms of like layout and dragging things around, but the actual copy. That was the part that was missing before, is the copy having that same amount of like that selling proposition of like it's automated.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll move on to could always talk endlessly about this stuff, especially how SMBs are going to use it. I think that's a super fascinating topic that I think we're going to be talking about a lot going forward. I wrote about a different topic that probably going to already does intersect with AI significantly, which is autonomous delivery. I wrote something today about a company called Bolt, which I think many of us have probably heard of. It's sort of an Uber plus scooters plus a bunch of other things in Europe and a bunch of other countries. It's in 45 different countries, based in Tallinn, Estonia, which is a city I'm sure most of us haven't been to. I actually have been there. It's a gorgeous, very small, very ancient city. It's right across the Gulf of Finland from Helsinki. And the joke I made in the post was the most popular thing on the ferry was the duty-free shop. Anyone who's been to Scandinavia knows how expensive alcohol is. So the duty-free shop is always an important feature in these things. But it isn't a gorgeous city, and Estonia has become kind of an unheralded tech hub in some ways, because some very interesting technology startups have come out of this country, Skype being one of them. That goes back a few years. Skype's kind of faded away. But so Bolt is partnered with this company called Starship Technologies, and that you keep wanting to call Starship Troopers or Battlestar Technologies or something like that. But at any rate, Starship Technologies, also founded by Estonians. So it's kind of this Estonian mobility mafia, I guess. But what they're going to do is they're going to start using Starship's robots to deliver Bolt food, which is basically Uber Eats, but their version of it, in Tallinn, this small city in the Baltics, which I remember being very hilly and very ancient with lots of small winding streets. And that, ancient European city, like most. These little robots are going to climb around the winding streets of Tallinn delivering food. So it's just an example of this thing that we thought kind of had gone away, hasn't really gone away. And the first thing I thought of when I saw this and said, I'm going to write something about this. First thing I thought of is what happened to the Amazon drones, because I hadn't thought about that in a while. And so I did a couple quick searches. Amazon, apparently, this is something on CNBC, so if this was wrong, blame them. But basically, Amazon had said that they were going to do like 10,000 drone deliveries this year. They've done 100. And also, Google is in this with, I think, Wing. Correct me if I'm wrong with that one. It's not right in front of me. And then Walmart has like 3 different drone partners that they're doing drone deliveries with. And GNC, where Rex Kwon Do gets his protein powder, they're doing drone deliveries now. So it feels like this one is starting to, get some air under its wing. Okay. So, I have more questions than answers at this point, whether this is just a lot of hot air or whether we're going to start seeing drones hovering over our houses, delivering sub 5-pound packages anytime soon. I still haven't seen this with my own eyes.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have, Mike, you're on the West Coast, might be more likely, but I think the trials have been mostly California and I think a bit in Texas. But this is still very early days, even though it's kind of been out there for a very long time.
Yeah. Now,
Anyway.
First off, I think the GNC example is probably not the best product market fit because you're talking about people that are like, fitness oriented. I would picture drone delivery being like, bring me my 7-Eleven, Twinkies and
things you do while gaming. You do while gaming.
But anyway, I think that the micro mobility / last mile delivery stuff, definitely a big opportunity. But then when you start to sort of peel it back, there's all kinds of challenges. So one, I think it's very sort of contextually dependent. So it makes a lot of sense in like urban density, where getting around is hard, but distance is not far. So New York City, some of those European cities is probably a good example too, where it just makes more sense for these robots to go along. I think that like Amazon's troubles and others like in underperforming, at least from a volume basis, I think has a lot to do with the infrastructure. One, you have FAA regulations. Two,
that has been part of the challenge.
Two, you have infrastructure on the receiving end. Like I think it's going to take a while to sort of assimilate, not just culturally, but in the way that like houses are architectured and designed and built to have some like big basket out front, sort of like the just
I'm
as
trying
standard.
To think how this thing is going to deliver to my house.
Yeah.
Is it going to parachute it down in front of my front door?
Yeah, there's so much quality control. Yeah, and I think that's why they have to test it. I think they're running into those problems probably in their first 100 deliveries and realizing, okay, now we got to go back to the drawing board. We're not going to hit 10,000. With the sort of little sort of robots, how you started it, those little sort of pods that roll around.
They're on the ground.
They're on the ground. I've always thought it's probably not a big problem, but just sort of like it's where my mind goes for some reason. It seems like, neighborhood kids pulling pranks. I mean, that's just like a target.
I want to ride on it. I'm just going to hop on it.
Or just take it and like, tie it to a tree or put it up in my tree house.
Yeah, or try to take it apart or whatever kids do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all part that is all, I think, probably problems I would hope that they've thought about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, back to the drones. One thing Walmart has done is they have created stores and they've designated as hubs for drone takeoff and delivery.
Yeah.
And stuff. So they're trying to think. I mean, obviously, a lot of thought's being given to the infrastructure. I don't know if it's been solved, of course.
I've always
there's
thought
that.
I've always thought the bigger opportunity is that hub and spoke system, but one that is moving. So, for example, you get like a semi truck that is delivering stuff, and they have a large sort of regional delivery, and then like you're driving along the highway, and maybe you're driving behind it, and all of a sudden you see like the lift gate open, and a bunch of drones just fly out with packages. They sort of they disperse around like a mile radius of the truck, deliver what they got to do, and then just like come back to home base and grab another thing.
Yeah, there's a beacon that brings them back.
Yeah. And that truck just sort of like drives down like an interstate, and those, the drones do their thing and return to the truck, and something like that could be cool. But also that probably rife with where it goes. Yeah, it's probably also rife with like infrastructure and regulatory stuff to do that.
I could see that getting the truck pulled over.
Yeah.
Until that's, this just launching drones as it's driving down, Highway 1. The other issue, which this made me also think of something I wrote about quite a bit last couple of years, which is the whole micro warehouse space.
Yeah.
Which has completely imploded. Mm-hmm. And this was this competition to go, we're going to do 30-minute delivery. No, we're going to do 15-minute delivery. And I think at one point I joked about how it reminded me of something about Mary, where that picks up the hitchhiker who's talking about his 10-minute abs video. And it's like, well, why couldn't someone just do 7-minute abs? And those, there was this race to the bottom, and they raised crap, gorillas and all these companies. Some of them, I think a lot of them nominally still exist, but so many of them have failed. And it's just been a very unsuccessful space.
Yeah.
And I think the other thought around this autonomous delivery is this a step towards the humanless gig workforce, where it's a fully, and I think Travis Kalanick said that quiet part out loud. I forgot when he said it or where he said it, but he did say it, at some point. We're in this to eventually have automated taxis and get rid of the drivers.
Yeah, that's political kryptonite whenever you allude to like.
Right, and he should never have said that out loud, but everyone knew that's what everyone was thinking, right? And they're still thinking that.
Yeah.
And so this is a step in that direction. How much of a step? Hard to say. When eventually, and just as automated taxis, which, are starting to slowly but surely become a thing. I think it's going to take a while. I think the barrier there is people's willingness to get in those cars more than anything. But with autonomous delivery, the human barrier is almost zero. It's like, as long as you get it to my house, I don't care.
Yeah.
But with cars, it's different. But still, at some point, will these things replace the gig worker, the guy on the bike with the big thing over his shoulder, or the Uber driver or whatever? And, I think that's going to take a while, but I think that is the goal. Mm-hmm. We'll see. Okay, Mike, why don't you tell me who won the week?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to sort of turn that on its head this week and talk about, I hope I have the editorial license to do this, who didn't win the week, or I guess who lost the week, if you
do, by the way.
Put it that way.
Have that license.
Anyway, so you may or may not have heard of this. There is a sort of social app called IRL. It's going to be now shutting down.
Does it mean what it sounds like? Is it supposed to mean in real life?
Yeah, in real life, which is an ironic title because it's actually shutting down because 95% of its reported users don't exist. So in other words, they don't exist in real life. So they're mostly bots and things like that. This got found out, interestingly enough, through an internal investigation by the company's own board that was a little suspicious that something was rotten in Denmark. And this sort of blew up, and the CEO was replaced. And now they're actually shutting down and returning their money to investors. So
how long did it how long was it up and running? Do you know offhand?
This was, I think it was like a decent amount of time, like the last couple of years. Because their last funding round was a C round. It was 170 million. It was actually from SoftBank, another sort of SoftBank flame out.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
Big red flag right there.
Yeah. But anyway, so Series C tells me that they were at least around a little while.
Yeah. Well, no, it takes some time to get to a Series C. The A and B were probably massive as well. And there has to be a little space between those. So yeah, wow. I mean, I read something the other day, quick aside, that said we're on the verge of a cascade of startup failures because so many of them are just unable to raise the next round they need to keep going and that kind of thing.
Yeah, different funding environment than when they first got funding, either down rounds or just outright, flame out or
I think a bit of probably a mixture of the two.
Recede into the night.
Yeah. I think it'll probably be a mixture of the two. What do we have to do to stay alive? Okay, we'll do a down round. We'll curtail, but we'll live to fight another day. Or let's just give what's left back to the investors and go do something else. It's going to be a mixture of the two, I think. Unless funding suddenly reappears. People are getting funded. It's still happening, but it's happening a lot less. We're not seeing the 20 TechCrunch funding announcements a day like we used to.
Exactly.
Anyway, I have a very quick Who Won the Week. Yesterday, I wrote something. Bird Eye, a company we cover a lot, their customer experience platform, review management, all that kind of stuff, messaging, all the things that we want to empower small businesses and enterprises to do to, engage better with their customers, create better experiences, that kind of thing. They hit an important milestone, which was $100 million of annual recurring revenue. Thought that was notable and worth a quick shout out and a quick congrats to them. Widely acknowledged as a milestone of a company that's achieved a sustainable revenue level and is on its way to scale if it hasn't scaled already.
Yeah, congrats to Dave Lehman and team. Great milestone. And as you said, it's not just revenue and scale, but sustainability in terms of a mark of, recurring revenue.
Right.
So good on them.
No, I mean, anyone who's hit that point is always thinking, well, what's next? What does really scaling mean to us? And but it's a very important, significant, it's a widely acknowledged milestone. Once you hit that, okay, that's for real, Anyway, just want to give them a shout out, acknowledge that. And Mike, why don't you read us out?
Yeah, thanks, Charlie. Thanks, everyone, for listening. This has been This Week in Local. Stay tuned every week for more episodes. You can find the show on all major podcast networks and find out more at localogy.com. So please subscribe, like, and comment. So I'm Mike Boland with Charles Laughlin. Our producer is Dara Sweat. So thanks for listening and see you next week.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Localogy's This Week in Local with Mike Boland and Charles Laughlin. Be sure to subscribe for more.